Hey, coming up next on Griot's Garage Treasures, we're here in Indianapolis, Indiana at Walter Goodwin's shop. Now, this is a historic shop. A lot of racing history here, right, Sam?
This is really hallowed ground. I can't believe I'm in this place. This is the way it was back in the 60s. The Vels Parnelli super team was here with some unbelievable drivers. Tell them who, Dave.
Guys like Mario Andretti, Joe Leonard, and Al Unser. Well, believe it or not, legend continues even to this day. Now, the shop is restoring race cars. You've seen cars that have been all in pristine condition. Well, you'll see them here, plus you'll see how they restore them. Coming up next here on Griot's Garage Treasures. Welcome to Griot's Garage Treasures. Well, we're here in Indianapolis, the absolute mecca of auto racing, and we've got a fella here who does some incredible work with race car restoration. That's Walter Goodwin.
You're going to see some stuff here that you're not going to see anywhere else. These are really rare cars and rare parts, and of course you have to make some of the parts for these cars, don't you?
Yeah, at times if we can't find the originals, we do have to make stuff.
But this is where they really get the restoration done. So when you see them out in public, now you know how it all happens. I see one over here, Sam, that I want to take a look at. This is a 1970 Lola that Mark Donahue drove at the Indianapolis 500. Started fifth, and I think he finished second with it. This car, by the way, is being restored.
It was as it was run in 71, and it was with the later bodywork. After Indy in 1970, they changed the bodywork, made the radiators bigger. They were having some overheating problems, and that's the way it was. It still had the original paint, the original pinstriping, just had the later bodywork that they changed.
Right up front was the radiator, and right behind it, you can see right here, was the oil tank. What they did is they had a tube here, as you can see running along the side. This carried coolant back to the engine. But this is what they called a monocoque tub. In other words, this is a whole tub that's all riveted together, and you can see the rivets all along here with the aluminum panels. It was made by Lola over in England. The designer is a fellow by the name of Eric Broadley. And he built a lot of race cars, not only for Indy, but also for Formula One, Can-Am, and all their different types of formulas.
Actually, the last car, that version, it was called the T150 series. That's a T153. That's the only one that was built in 70.
This is an air duct here. They call it a Nacket duct. It'll fit right here. What it does is it lets some air come in here so the driver can get a little bit of air, be a little bit more comfortable. Right up here you can see all independent front suspension along with independent suspension in the back. Along the sides are the fuel cells where they fit in there. And to fill it, I call this a buckeye, it would fit in the side like so. Then the fueler would come up, attach a hose to it. Had little vents here, you'd put your fingers down in to see how much fuel came up. Once it got up there, close that, disconnected this, and the driver was off.
On that particular car, it had a flip top, so they would open that lid in order to let the air out of the fuel cell. It wasn't one that you pushed down with your finger.
Back in here, they would have a secondary radiator and also an oil cooler on the other side. They also vented the tanks here through the roll bar. Even had a pin right here. You could take this roll bar off. You notice this bolt here on the side? It's got a little wire on it. What they did is they would put the bolts in. These are all aircraft quality or grade 8 type bolts. And then they would safety wire it to keep it in so it wouldn't back out. You see this a lot on aircraft, and there's a lot of similarities between aircraft and race cars. Here is where the engine fit. It was not easy to put in.
That's a 4-cam Ford. It's the turbocharged version. That one has a Schweitzer turbocharger, what they call the wet plenum system, which is a high-pressure operated system. Made probably at that point in time 800 horsepower. When they cranked the boost into it, probably made around 1,000 horsepower.
Car weighed around 1,500 to 1,600 pounds. It was fast. It was pretty comfortable to drive. Pretty nice car.
That car didn't run that much. It ran only 3 races in 1970, and then in 71 it became the backup car for David Hobbs. Then it moved into a third hand, but it never really made a race again.
Roger Penske always had his cars in blue back in those days and always painted the inside of them too. He figured out that added a lot of weight. You won't see that anymore in Roger Penske's cars.
This is unbelievable to be in a room with this many 4-cam Fords. Look at these engines. This engine's a real short skirt, all aluminum, got a short stroke. Now, if it was a turbo car, it was 168 cubic inch displacement. That's real small. And then the non-turbos were 255 cubic inch.
Turbocharged, when they'd really crank the boost up, they'd put out 1,000, 1,100 horsepower. Normally aspirated 550.
This was in a dry sump setup. You had two scavenge pumps, a pressure pump. Now these pumps are all individual, and there's a shaft that connects them, so the alignment here was perfect, because you want this to turn free, this to turn free, and the same with this one. This is a lot of craftsmanship here. These motors you don't build in a day.
The man hours to rebuild those 4-cam Ford engines is usually between 80 to 100 hours. Depends on how much time we have to spend on valves and getting the pumps all aligned, both with the crankshaft and with themselves.
These things will run 10,000 RPM. Here's one with a pan on it, and here's the top end, the business end. And they call them a 4-cam Ford. Obviously, it had 4 cams. Now, in this configuration for Indy, the exhaust cams were here, your stacks came up. This is your intake and your intake cams, and these things had a gear train in the front. No chains. Whole bunch of gears. You got ball bearings here in the case. It was a lot of work to set up these cams and set them up right. They also used these engines later on in sprint cars. Now, these things, by the way, were introduced in about 1964, ran into the early 70s. In the sprint car, the heads are symmetrical, so you could swap them from side to side, so the exhaust would come out the side for the sprint cars. The cam lobe goes right on a follower, which is on top of the valve. Pushes down the valve. It encompasses the valve spring, and I'll show you some of these on the head over here, where you got some cams, and these are labeled. This is exhaust cam, exhaust valve. And if you look at this follower, it went right on top of the spring. It was keyed, so it rode up and down the head, didn't turn, didn't rotate. There's a little pad in here that depresses right on the end of the valve stem tip to increase your clearance. When you had it all together, put your feeler gauge in there. If you had to add a little valve lash, you pulled it out around the end of the stem. If you had too much lash, then you were talking about taking the valve out and putting it along the stem and sink the seat, whatever, to bring up your clearance. Look at these dome pistons, and it's a pent roof style combustion chamber. You got reliefs for the valves. The valve to piston clearance was very critical, particularly at high RPM. You start getting any valve float. You don't want to kiss them. A lot of time fitting these things, and that's what made these engines so nice. They were very sexy, went for a long time.
The big thing with those engines was they weighed so much. They were big, but they were also heavy. They were like 550 pounds, and that's a big killer. The Offies, they finally got those to where they could actually live better. They were lighter, they were smaller, made as much horsepower. And then the Cosworths came along, which just re-revolutionized the IndyCar deal because they were a stress member motor.
Lots of gears, lots of valves, a great way to go. This is awesome. We got a whole lot more coming here at Griot's Garage Treasures, but right now we need to take a break. We'll be right back.
With more than 22 years of experience, Griot's Garage is car care for the perfectionist. Whether you're cleaning a daily driver or perfecting the paint on your dream car, Griot's Garage makes a full line of products to suit all your car care needs. From paint and upholstery to wheels and tires, leather and carpet, glass and chrome. Car care liquids made in the USA and backed by our promise. We make it, we teach it, we guarantee it. Have fun in your garage at griotsgarage.com.
Griot's Garage Treasures is being brought to you by Griot's Car Care for the Perfectionist. And by ARP, the world leader in fastener technology. And by Advance Auto Parts. Service is our best part.
I'll tell you what, this car right here, this Lotus, is absolutely one of my favorites, and it's also a car that changed the face of the Indianapolis 500. This car was the team car to Jimmy Clark in 1965. This is a Lotus 38, but this is chassis number 2. Bobby Johns drove this car, and as you can see, it's really narrow, efficient. Colin Chapman was the designer of these cars, and Colin's philosophy was to make them as light and as efficient as possible.
The big one is the offset suspension. Chapman decided that he'd try and have more left side weight, so he shifted the actual tub to the left side. The rockers, A-arms, are all longer on the right side than the left. The earlier car, they ran the water pipe that later ran down the outside of the car. They ran it down the inside. So actually your left shoulder is sitting against the hot water pipe.
So if you ran a 500-mile race, you better not run a 501-mile race with it, because that extra mile might be a mile too far for it. They were a little bit flimsy, but they were fast.
So everybody built cars with offset suspensions right up until Clint Bronner and Mario Andretti ran their Bronner Hawk Brabham, which was straight up, and then they were faster, and it's like, oh, well, maybe we don't need that.
This was painted in the traditional Lotus colors. Beautiful car. This is fully restored, and they run this. Had a monocoque chassis in it, like they always did back then. This car is run at Goodwood now with guys like Dario Franchitti. If you go back a little farther, if you look, you can see that Lotus had the air boxes here. This was kind of a touch that they used. used to get a little bit more performance.
The bottom of the cars were V'd out, and they ran the oil lines and other water line down that V in the bottom of the tub to go back and forth for the engine. And then they ran the gearbox oil cooler lines down the outside.
And when I told you about the engine being tight, you need grease to slide this thing in there. It's so tight. No room at all. So what they did is they made access ports here in the cockpit. Take this off, you can get to the mag, and over here you can get to the fuel pump. So you can see everything is pretty compact in here. They used a 255 Ford naturally aspirated engine in it, and these are the famous spaghetti exhaust pipes. If you look closely on this thing, you'll see that these are nothing but a pain to install. It takes a while to do it, and if you try to take them out after they're hot, it's always a real pain. Very tough to do, but once you get them in, the sound is phenomenal. The rear end was a 2-speed ZF gearbox, all independent suspension on this thing. Car was very light. It really changed the face of IndyCar racing after it came on the scene.
The car then went back to Europe, believe it or not. They put a symmetrical suspension on it, and Jimmy Clark actually hill climbed the car in France and Switzerland. It came back in 1966. Clark himself drove it, spun it twice, finished second. Then A.J. Foyt, whose team had managed to crash everything they had during the month of May, bought it. He went to Milwaukee to run it the next week. Something broke in the suspension and he crashed and got burned pretty badly, missed most of the season. But that was all with that car.
And of course, there's something about it being able to touch the same steering wheel that Jimmy Clark drove.
Dave talked about restoring these cars. This is basically the same as that Lotus over there. Let's go ahead and take this cover off. Let's set this back here. Dave kept mentioning the engine's in tight. Now this is just a mock-up, an engine that they fit in here just to put this car back together. You can see now there's no place for the exhaust to come out here. That's why it's coming out the top and your intake is here. When you got this car, was this thing wrecked?
No, it wasn't wrecked, but it had been used for many years. It had had Chevrolet V8s put in it. It had 4-speed shifters put in it instead of the 2-speed. And in fact, when we got it, it had a 4-cylinder Pinto engine in it, and the Shriners were using it for a parade car.
That's awesome. So you're making some panels here. I can see this is made. That's all nice and formed and drilled. How about the dashboard? Is that a piece you made?
The actual frame's original, but we're just fitting up an actual gauge panel. We'll use this one to make sure everything fits, and we'll make a final one to use.
And you can see where this car was riveted together. When they start fitting things, they use these things called clecos that come from the aircraft. A cleco, and they take a cleco pliers. It's basically just a little temporary rivet. It's got a wedge in here, so when you let it go, it opens up, and you'd put it in the hole like this, fit it in there, release it, hold things together. But I had never seen these before. This is another form of cleco, huh?
Yeah, it's just what I call a wing nut cleco.
So what the idea with this is, you go ahead and screw this in. Now you can use this and really pull the panels together.
Yeah, they actually make a tool that'll go on the wing nut. This one just has a spring in it, so it'll only pull so much. You can take that one and you just keep winding it up until you can actually squeeze together, 2, 3, 4 panels.
They're making panels like this bulkhead was made here. How long does it take you to do one of these restorations if it's not wrecked?
It's hard to say. I mean, every car is different. A car like this where we've had to have the tub completely apart, you're probably 600, 800 hours. It's time intensive.
Well, you can see there's a lot of work going into taking, obviously, a very rare and vintage race car and turning it into a finished piece like that car Dave just showed you over there. We got a lot more coming here at Griot's Garage Treasures. Going to take a break. Don't go away. Now, these things here, they come in different classifications.
With more than 22 years of experience, Griot's Garage is car care for the perfectionist. Whether you're cleaning a daily driver or perfecting the paint on your dream car, Griot's Garage makes a full line of products to suit all your car care needs. From paint and upholstery to wheels and tires, leather and carpet, glass and chrome. Car care liquids made in the USA and backed by our promise. We make it, we teach it, we guarantee it. Have fun in your garage at griotsgarage.com.
Back to Griot's Garage Treasures. Well, here's a car that I find really interesting. Back in 1966, Lola came to the Speedway with 3 cars. Chassis number 1 was this one right here. This is a car that Roger Ward drove. Now, Roger Ward was one of my heroes when I was growing up, and even got a chance to meet him a few times. This is a car that he drove at the Speedway in 1966. It's also the last race he drove at the Speedway. He retired out of this car. The other 2 chassis, chassis number 2 went to Jackie Stewart. Chassis number 3 went to Graham Hill. Bottom line is Graham Hill won the race that year. but Roger retired out of it. But this is the Lola back then. Interesting car.
Yeah, the steering on that, the column runs at an angle because they used a streetcar steering and modified it for the Indy car. The pinion's offset to the left, so the steering column runs at an angle, and I just couldn't believe that was correct. Al had driven the car at one time, and he works with us periodically, and so we had him in and said, what's the deal? And he said, oh no, that's just the way it is. You just learn to drive with the wheel farther away here and shorter here when you're driving the car. To me, that would be very disconcerting. He said you get used to it.
And if you look back here, it's a supercharged Offie. The other two cars had naturally aspirated Fords, but Roger got the supercharged Offie.
Most Offies have 4 leads on the header. This one has 1 per valve, so there's 8 on that one. Dick Jones from Champion Spark Plug Company was the one who came up with the supercharged Offie idea. They did a lot of work on their dyno trying to get power out of it, and that was one of the things they did was really play around with the headers. There were 3 or 4 versions of the headers for those.
They had to cant the engine over a little bit in order to get the supercharger up where it needed to be so they could mount it here in the car.
With the supercharger, it has a giant gear drive on the back of the engine. Most of the Offies, the bell housing was part of the engine, part of the case. This one is an earlier case that has a bolt-on bell housing. They made that unit bigger, and they run some big drive gears up. It has a special flywheel, massively heavy. It takes 2 of us to physically pick up the supercharger and put that drive unit onto that engine.
This was unique back at the time, but you don't see many supercharged Offies.
Most Offies, you have to crank them and crank them and crank them to start them. That one, you hit the button and it starts instantly. The first time we went to start it on the dyno, we were just going to turn it over and we accidentally had the switch on, hit the switch and it tried to fire, scared the hell out of us. There's something different about that car.
Get the shop really full. Now that's a later car there, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a 1970 Lola T270. That car was driven by Sammy Sessions to 4th place. He was a teammate with Cale Yarborough and Lloyd Ruby. It's a little different. It's a 4-speed gearbox in that one, and this one has inboard brakes, which was something that was a little different actually.
Cool. Did I run the 4-cam Ford in that?
That one is also turbocharged, but that's a Hilburn turbocharger, a different system.
I see. That car looks bigger and more substantial.
It is. It was a bigger car, flatter, a lot of fiberglass bodywork.
This car here, this is all fiberglass. This looks like it's in great shape. Did you make molds and fix this?
Yeah, this car, the bodywork was starting to get out of shape and the gel coat was getting cracked pretty badly, so we had new molds made.
What is this?
This is a 1967 Lola T90 Mark II. This is chassis 5, I believe. Al Sr. finished 2nd with this in 1967. It was a Retzlaff Chemical Special.
Now you can see both of these cars have got the big transaxle hanging out the back, which is a transmission and a differential, a final drive all together, inboard brakes net. He's got one apart over here. I really want to take a look at that. Okay, now this is a transaxle housing there. This is a 2-speed.
2-speed Halibrand.
This thing's pretty corroded inside. What do you have to do to that?
We'll glass beat it, get all the corrosion off. We'll have it dip and get it back where we can use it again.
Cool. Now reading the call these quick changes, when it's in the car, you just take off the cover, change the gears in the back, put it back together. You can change the gear ratios for the track. These things are old. They've been around a long time. This thing's got a ring gear carrier with the ring gear on it. You got your pinion gear. You got your clutch drive. You even got oil pumps in these. You start taking these apart, things are broken. What do?
We've got a pretty good network of people who worked on the cars over the years, and we try and use that to see if we can find the original parts. But if we can't, we have to make them.
Now see right here, here's a perfect example. What's this flywheel for?
That's for a 4-cam Ford with the Ford clutch. This one's for a Ford, but you change the bolt pattern, you can use it on an Offie.
That came out of a blank just like this. Got some good steel, the right kind of metal. They machine it out, and out of a piece of blank, now you've got a flywheel. You can't find these anymore.
No, I mean, you couldn't get them anymore, so we just had to start making them.
So you can see, from this to this, you're the only guy in the world with those flywheels. Let's go see what Davey's doing. He gets lost in this place. He finds a car. I heard him going a little while ago. Let's check him out.
Well, this is an interesting car right here. This is a 71 Coyote. This is a Foyt car. AJ probably drove. It was designed by Bob Riley. But this car, as you can see, is kind of rough, but a lot of it's here. It's undergoing a restoration. Thing of it is, I think this is going to require us to come back at another time to see how this one comes out. In the meantime, though, we're going to go to a legendary mechanic's garage. That guy is AJ Watson.
Griot's Garage Treasures is being brought to you by Griot's Car Care for the Perfectionist. And by Advance Auto Parts. Service is our best part. And by Original Parts Group. world's largest source of GMA body parts and accessories.
Hey, welcome back to Griot's Garage Treasures. Well, we've taken a little bit of a trip. We've moved over to Pittsboro, Indiana, into a nondescript garage out here on a farm. But what we have found in this garage is the legendary A.J. Watson of Indy fame. And A.J., thank you so much for allowing us to come here into your garage. The reason I wanted to come here, though, is you've got a race car that you built years ago. Tell me a little bit about this Bob Estes Special.
I built this in 1953. I sold it to Estes then after we ran it. It was a Watson Pan Special then.
Why did you call it that?
Well, we got all cheap things in it. Anything we got free or any other way, steal it or what. Like it's a spring front and just 2 torsion bars rear. Pretty simple car for the Speedway. Ran 1950 the first year with Dick Rathman driving. And then Joe James drove it 51 and 52. Jim Rigsby drove it. And 53, Don Freeland drove it. And this is the way it was in 53.
Beautiful car. It's got a 270 Offie in it. Pretty simple engine, but it was around for a long time. It did a great job.
They have a good engines. They last forever.
And the gearbox in it? What was that?
Model A gearboxes. Used them for years.
You'd think they had a lot of high-tech stuff there at the Speedway, but they didn't. It was all pretty simple. Well, we've had a lot of fun here in our garage, and especially with AJ, and we want to thank you for letting us come in here, but we want you to have fun in your garage.
Griot's Garage wants you to have fun in your garage. Now, here's your car care tip of the week with Richard Griot.
Hi, this week to have fun in your garage, we're going to talk about Griot's Garage paint sealant. It's a great product for your daily driver, and it really protects your paint for up to 1 year. Paint sealant is applied just like wax, so start with a clean, clayed surface. And if you'd like to polish away swirls and scratches, do that first. However, paint sealant has tremendous fill capabilities that hide imperfections, so polishing may not be necessary. Then apply paint sealant to a foam wax pad. With your orbital set to speed 2 or 3, work it into the paint using a cross-hatch pattern, spreading a thin, even coat across the entire surface. Application of paint sealant can also be done by hand using our wax pads and foam pad holders. Once sealant has been applied to the entire car, allow it to cure for an hour before buffing. When it is fully cured, it won't smear when you draw your finger across the surface. At that point, use a soft cloth to buff off the excess sealant to a deep shine. Paint sealant is compatible with Griot's Garage waxes, so they can be layered on top to enhance the finish. And it was developed alongside spray-on wax, which will increase the longevity of the sealant protection from wash to wash. Paint sealant is a polymer-based sealant blended with waxes, so it provides a great-looking finish that lasts up to 1 year. If your daily driver is looking tired and has a bunch of swirl marks, use our one-step sealant. It takes care of everything and knocks out the swirl marks and protects your paint for up to 1 year.
Well, you want to have a motorcycle? You want to have a car? What do you want? A trike? For you trike riders out there, look at this. All you have is an 80 cubic inch Harley Davidson with a Watson Roadster front end, disc brakes, solid axle. This is the way to go. Put a couple of seats in, you can take more than 1 gal with you.
Looks like you found Watson's latest creation here.
I want to ride this thing.
I can believe it. Well, we've run out of time once again, but we want to thank you folks for watching. Stay tuned for more here on Griot's Garage Treasures.
See ya. This is awesome. Look at this. Brake pedal up there.